The sister stitch of the Sisal stitch is the Seagrass stitch. It has a beautiful natural slant to it for a cool zigzag configuration. You can do it with or without a border and make it in the round. So knit flat or in the round, we'll do both today. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. So if you saw my Sisal stitch, you saw that it works really well in a flat panel, but it doesn't work in the round. So we have the Seagrass stitch, which works beautifully in the round. And that's really my favorite application of this, this stitch here. It tilts to the side. You can see where the cast on was here, and then you can see my starter peg is here. So it's kind of far away. So if I ran this vertically up, you can see it ends here. So it naturally tilts to the left here. But if you wanted to, you can run it in the opposite direction. So depending upon which way you work your stitches, you can actually make it tilt the other way. So it really doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed, and in the round, it doesn't really matter if it's leaning to the left or right. Once you do that, you can't really change the twist in the round. However, you can change directions in a flat panel. Now, if you want something straight up and down, you're going to want to go back to the Sisal stitch, and that's why I'm showing you this one more time. So be sure and check out the video on the Sisal stitch. I'll put this away and we'll move on to the Seagrass. All right, so I want to show you that you can do it with a border or without a border. You couldn't do that on the Sisal. You do see that it has a little bit of puckering still, but the rows are not exactly 1.5 times taller like the Sisal did. However, on the border, I used a U-wrap knit here, which is what I use in the main stitch here. But I would suggest you just use an E-wrap on the borders only, and you won't have that problem at all. You can also choose to do it without a border. However, this leading edge is stockinette, and so it might curl on you unless you put something else to stop it, like adding a border later, or you could start with a garter right here, or you could add tassels or whatever you want to do. I'm going to show it to you in the round because I think that's my favorite way and the easiest way to show you. You can go in either direction. And then after, I'm going to show you all the other tips on here as to how to work this one where it can bend and change shape. So you can actually make yourself a zigzag stitch. All right, let's get started. For supplies, you're going to need a loom that has a multiple of 2 pegs. So this one is a 48 peg loom. I'm using a large gauge today with the super bulky weight 6 yarn. The spacing between center peg to center peg is 5/8 of an inch. For in the round, make sure it's a multiple of 2, and if you need a multiple of 4 for a 2x2 ribbing, then you'll need that. If you want to use a small gauge loom with a medium 4 weight yarn, that's fine too. So just a yarn that's appropriate to the loom that you're using. I'm using Premier Everyday Bulky Anti-Pilling. This is actually a super bulky number 6 weight yarn, and this is color Mint, and this one over here is color Aqua if you're interested in that. You'll also need your loom pick, a starter stitch marker just to show your number 1 peg. And then if you want a stitch marker to mark yarn overs every other peg, that's fine. It's up to you. You probably won't need it in the round, but for a flat panel you might. All right, let's begin. You're going to cast on in whatever way you like to cast on, join in the round, and then you can begin working in the round in this stitch. It will roll a little bit, but if you want to put a border edge like a garter stitch or a seed stitch or even a ribbing like this, then you'll want to do that first. I'm going to work on row 1 of the stitch pattern, or round 1. You're just going to bind off 1 stitch. So we're going to knit the first stitch, knit the second stitch, and I'm just using a U-wrap method where I just put the yarn around. I'm going to lift the second stitch and put it on the first, and then knit it off. Okay, lift up and over. I have a blank or empty peg, and we're just going to E-wrap yarn over and fill that peg. That's it. You're just going to do that all the way around the loom. So let's do it one more time. So we're going to take our yarn, wrap around this peg, knit off, knit off the next one, pick the second one up, put it on the first, and knit off, E-wrap yarn over, and continue in the round until you get back to this stitch marker here. You can also work the opposite direction. So I'm working right to left, and this is a clockwise fashion, but you can also work left to right in a counterclockwise fashion, and it will change how it slants for you. All right, so continue working the round. Meet me back up right here for round 2. Okay, I want to show you the last 6 stitches on here so you can see what it looks like when I'm holding it down, or say if it was on my lap or on my chest or something. Yes, that's where I knit. I just want to show you how quickly it can go, because normally in a video I'm holding it up here. All right, so I just yarn over and then I go immediately into my next stitch. So in my head I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2. Every time I go around I go 1, 2, and then I move it. 1, 2. 1, 2, and then I move it. So you can see how quickly those last stitches went. And then we're now ready for round 3. All you do is knit. So you just knit all the way around. Okay, so you're just, actually it's easier if I just put it down here. So you're just knitting across all the way around, and I start turning as I'm going. Some people work theirs upside down. This is just how I do it. And I'm not always on a table. It's usually like on my lap somehow, or on a pillow in my lap. And so that's it. And so you just continue working in the round. It's just a 2 round repeat. And then next we're going to go into how to make it in a flat panel. To get the Seagrass Slouchy Beanie pattern, click on the link to the blog down in the description below. All right, so we are on the flat panel section of the video, and I've got lots of tips, and I'll talk about if you want to use a border or no border, and also if you want it to slant to the left or right or not. If you do not, you're going to want to look at the Sisal stitch video. The Sisal stitch is a completely vertical stitch. It won't allow you to do a border, and you'll have to see that video to see why, but you can add one on later. That's totally fine, or connect the panels together, and it's a cute stitch all by itself. But to get this cool slant, you are going to be working your bind offs in one direction or the other. So depending upon which directions the bind offs go, you'll be working to the left or to the right. And then the secret sauce in making this little bend here right now, I'll tell you, is an extra knit row. That's it. It's still the same stitch repeat, so it's still the same where you're binding off in one direction and then you yarn over, and then when you want to go in the other direction after you've knit a row, you just knit one more row and then you go in the opposite direction. So this one is opposite of how I showed you before. Before we were working from right to left, and our yarn overs would come after we did a bind off, but in this case we're working from left to right when we do our bind off row. So this one I've bound off this stitch, move these over, and then this second one is where we did a yarn over. And so here we're marking these with a stitch marker, and it makes it really easy, especially when we start changing directions, because you can pick them up and just move them over. And then I've got the last ones noted with a different stitch marker on the first peg and the last peg to make sure that I am slipping my first peg and knitting my last peg, and then the opposite row goes the opposite direction. So you can see more about the slip stitches on the Sisal video, and that's totally fine. I want to show you what it looks like when we are working in the direction from left to right. This one is, I'm on row 1, and we're going to work a border. So in order to work the border, I'm going to say one more time, you worked with a unit. In the beginning of the video I said you worked with a unit stitch in the middle here. I also worked it on these borders, but I still think it puckers just a little bit. So either be much looser when you work a unit stitch for your border, or you could do an E-wrap here. So I'm working my borders with my knit stitches going from left to right and my purls from right to left. You can switch that up for yourself, but if you're going to do that, you can do these 2 stitches E-wrap, or you can do a unit wrap. I'm just going to keep mine with the U, so we just do 1, 2. That's it. So we've got a slip stitch and we've got 2 unit wraps. Then the next 2 stitches are bind off, so we're going to knit the next 2 and move it over, and that's bind off 1, E-wrap, yarn over. Okay, and then we go to the next one, bind off one, move it over, E-wrap, yarn over, just as we did before. You're just working in the opposite direction. So I'm going to speed the video up and meet you down here for the rest of that row and then the second row. All right, so we've done the main stitch pattern in the middle and we're ready to complete the border. We're just going to U-wrap knit these 2 pegs here and knit the last peg. Again, do E-wrap if you're doing E-wrap. Now I'm going to work on my way back for a knit row, and that is for the 2-row repeat for the seagrass in the middle, but the border I'm doing a purl to the left. So we're still slipping that first stitch. We're going to purl the first 2. Okay, and then knit across until we get to our next marker. And I'll just talk about how many stitches and stuff as I go. So I'm just knitting across. So this particular sample has 16 pegs. Use a multiple of 2 to do it this way. And then you've got 3 stitches on the front and 3 stitches on the end. Now, if you're working with a different gauge, your numbers may change and you may want to do more stitches on the side instead. All right, coming up to this last stitch here, and now we're going to purl 2. Do not purl the last stitch. The last stitch you're going to E-wrap or knit every time. That will give you that nice clean edge. If you knit it, you're going to get a bump on this side and a nice clean edge on this side. That's just how it is whenever you're working slip stitch rows. All the purl rows need to have a knit stitch at the end. All right, so that's the end of that repeat. Now we want to move our stitches over and switch directions. So if you see here, it looks like this was more of a flat panel and you're like, Kristen, that's straight. Well, it's actually not. It's actually slightly bending and you can see it very clearly here. See how it bends here? Now it's more of a severe bend. It's like a more dramatic bend on this one because this also has 16 stitches, and because it's wider, the bend is more dramatic. Okay, so you're only going to get a slight wiggle when you have less stitches. Okay, so I can see a multiple. I've got 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. I've got these little columns. So I've got a column of 2, column of 2, 2, 2, and 2. And those go across. So it looks like I have 5 columns. And over here, it looks like I have 7 columns. So you can see how it shows that bend a little bit less on this one. All right, so let's go make this other one. And then I'll show you moving them in the other direction. And then we're nearly finished. So we're just going to knit everything. Okay, so we just knit before, but now we're really knitting everything. And then what I do to keep up with making sure all of my bends are the same, I use a row counter. And so I know that that was the 12th time I had bind off rows. So I've been keeping count of it over here. So I just go flip. Okay, I had 12 that I did in this little section here, because I know I did 12 down here too, and then I had a few rows of garter stitch here. So if you want to duplicate this, you're welcome to go ahead, and you kind of know my pattern already. All right, so finish it off with knitting these stitches all the way to the end, and then you're going to go ahead and go return back and purl twice. Again, if you're left-handed, this may be opposite for you as far as which row you purl on. All right, so go ahead and you're going to bind off these first 2 stitches. Move the second one over the first, bind it off. And then after I've done the bind off, I'm going to lift it up, take off my stitch marker, and then replace that stitch back down. Then put my stitch marker on the empty peg. And then I can yarn over and move on to the next one. So I knit 2, move it over, knit over, pick it up, remove the stitch marker, replace it, put the stitch marker down on the empty peg, and keep continuing on in my pattern. So that is it. You have got a zigzag scarf you can start with or without a border. You can put on an edge here because this is going to roll. It's a stockinette. You can actually just begin with this here or seed stitch or whatever you like for the border. Add fringe or crochet on, whatever you want to do. If you want the straight, use the sisal, and if you want it in a hat pattern or something in the round like a bag, absolutely do the pattern in the round. It's fantastic. I hope you enjoyed this stitch today. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.